otherwise I'm going to. If anyone doesn't want to be shown, please just turn your camera off. That's understandable. I just wanted to start by saying thank you for joining this room. Hopefully there'll be a few more folk coming in as well. But in the short term, let's start with a few introductions. So Naomi, you've got your audio on. So do you want to start by introducing yourself? And what I'd love you to think about or explain is what you've done, but also how that relates to the sales and business development journey, in a sense, with the businesses that you've worked with or been with.
Okay, so I am a growth and innovation consultant. I've been working with startups and scale-ups for a number of years. I've probably mentored about 400 businesses, and I've probably seen about 2,000 pitches. 50% of my time is working directly with businesses, and that might be around new markets, helping them scale, and generally helping them scale is doing that through partnerships and getting other people to sell their stuff. And also, I would say the other 50% of my time is spent on entrepreneurship programs, very similar to what Alistair does, and that's either with universities or with the public and private sector. Excellent, good stuff. Naomi, thanks very much for that introduction. Susan, if you'd like to introduce yourself, your business, and perhaps a little bit about your sales journey as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Cavani. I'm the founder and CEO of Eugenie. It's a B2B SaaS platform, which is for online communities and memberships. Think Facebook meets a membership platform. We have both an off-the-shelf platform and a white label. As a founder myself, I'm a co-founder of Eugenie. I have been responsible for all things across the business, but also the sales journey that we've taken from MVP to paying customers. Prior to Eugenie, I worked in an international laser manufacturing business, and I was also responsible for sales there. So when I joined the company, we had one product, we turned that into 3, and also we tripled sales over the first 3 years of me being there. So I've been involved on the ground doing sales, but also in sales and marketing strategy for growth. Awesome, excellent. Martin just commented here, I'm looking forward to this conversation this afternoon. I'll come to your question in a minute, Martin, as well. Anne, if you want to introduce yourself, obviously, how do we know each other? Let's start with that as well.
Know each other for years from Uri, from pitch contest, the first pitch contest I ever did. In Uri, myself and Linda Farrelly, met you there. Excellent, excellent. And obviously, tell us about yourself and your background, obviously, and what you're doing with Journey Protector as well. Right, I worked mostly in R&D. I used to write code probably before half the people listening in today were born. But then in 2014, we set up an automotive company, providing bespoke automotive products, B2B. And we were approached by a driver who'd been beaten up. He wanted security products for the truck. We looked at the market, we looked at what he'd had in the truck and realized that what they thought was the issue wasn't what we saw as the issue. So we hit the law books, we spoke to customs, drivers, etc. We saw where the gap in the market was and we built something accordingly. But then we met a girl who'd been trafficked, and we decided that it was more important for us to stop that happening to anybody else if we could. So we pivoted. Now we still provide security, etc., but we pivoted so that we would protect migrants and prevent driver collision and people trafficking. And that's basically us. Excellent, happy days. And in terms of any of your experience working in code, did you have a Scooby-Doo about sales before this? No. Okay, good. I really hadn't got a clue. Yeah. You know, even with, because we didn't advertise, it was all word of mouth with the other company as well. Yeah. So yeah, to a certain extent, it's the same here. It's using your network. Yeah. Which I didn't realize that was a thing. You know, I just thought it was, well, I know such and such, he needs this. I didn't realize it was like a proper organized method of sales. I just thought it was something that happened, but then I found out I was wrong. No. We'll be delving into this a little bit more, but I just wanted to set the scene by going,
Anne, coding background. Susan obviously has a sales and marketing background. Naomi obviously has a wealth of background, obviously in business and also mentoring and supporting over, I think I'm going to say 400 tech businesses. Me, I'm just a blagger. So it's just a joiner of dots that I do. And but that's all sales. That's all sales.
It's sales. You're very similar. We're like two peas in a pod. A lot of the stuff that you do is very similar, and it's selling. And I think Anne has articulated it beautifully, that actually, doing it through your network it is, for some people, it seems like an alien thing to do, but actually it's probably what we do all the time, and actually the easiest way of doing it in the first instance. And for my clients, I always think about, okay, what's the quickest route to market? Getting other people to sell your stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I want to hear in the next 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so is some nice anecdotal stories from you all, including anyone that's listening in as well, and they have an example that they can give. Some stories of successes, and I'm not going to use the F word, but well, I will, but not the one you're thinking of, failures rather than F-ups, and then key lessons and tips that you've learned along the way. Because I think we've all had some good and bad experiences working in the industry and knowing what works, what doesn't. Martin's question, which Martin, we will come back to on and a little bit further down in terms is, what are the signals or benchmarks that tells a business owner that the business is ready to scale? Great question, Martin. So we'll definitely come back to that. And Susan, Naomi, if you can have a little bit of a think about that in terms of obviously where you guys are at. And what I would say is that you, Anne, Susan, you're on that growth trajectory. I wouldn't classify you necessarily as a scale up, if that makes sense. Is that fair?
That's very fair.
Yep. Okay, good. Susan, what about yourself? Would you say now you're a scale up, or would you say you're on the journey, the growth journey to scale up status?
I feel like you're always on some sort of journey to scale. But I think we're probably coming out of startup mode and going into scale up mode. So that's probably the right way to define it.
Good, good, good. And then Naomi, I'm going to then ask you the question, which is next on my list in my head, which is, what do you think then defines a startup as one that is starting to scale? What are some of the benchmarks or the characteristics that you think makes a startup scaling? Oh, Naomi, audio.
I'm on mute. Rookie mistake, sorry. So in my definition of startups, obviously really a stage determining what the product market fit is, finding out more about their customers, experimenting with like customer segmentation, etc., and really working about finding out how they can sell this thing that they've got and getting some customers. Scale Up has already validated their idea and their product in the marketplace, and they've proven that they've got sales, they've got customers, and they're now looking to get even more customers. That's how I would define it. Yeah,
no, fair enough. And obviously in terms of, we could all get some sales. Like I could go down to the market and sell some t-shirts and I would count that as sales, or I could sell some t-shirts online. What type of volume are we looking at? Or is it just like a hypothetical number depending on the type of business? It's a hypothetical number depending on the size of the business. So to give you an example, I'm working with a client at the moment, and they have proven what their product is. They've done a number of pilots, and they're at the point now where they're looking to scale. So they've got at least 14 customers, but those customers are significant customers. And what they're now looking at is they want to bring on at least another 5 to 10 customers. But even that, they get to the point of say that extra 10 customers, there's going to have to be perhaps some investment for them to be able to get to that next scale, because next stage, because it might be that actually they're going to have to update their systems. They might have to update their operations. So I think there's quite a big leap. And then also, just to also give you a bit of context as well. So the friend of mine has got a product, which is a mentoring platform, and he's worked really, really hard to get his first enterprise customer. So, a really big company who's going to buy his product at scale. And then in turn, if they really like it, he's going to get other really big, enormous companies buy that product at scale. But it's taken him a number of years to get that very big first customer.
He's done lots of other things to test the product works, etc. But actually, he's got a sort of like SaaS type product that is as a mass market product. And actually, his first really big customer is an American customer who is huge, and he's based in Manchester. So I think that it depends on what it is. You know, if we're going to use a t-shirt analogy, Alistair, if you look at like, you know, Superdry, they started on a market stall. They would have gone from market stall to selling a number of t-shirts. It's actually, okay, this I can only do this market 3 days a week. Let's get a shop. Actually, this shop's doing really well. Let's get 3 shops, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So obviously the question then, and before we come to Susan with Susan with your SaaS platform, using the question that Martin asked, which is obviously a benchmark to tell the business owner the business is ready to scale, is that a reasonable good analogy then to have in terms of you literally reach the capacity to be able to do things successfully without growth?
There's a number of things that you've got to consider, because also if you're talking about scaling up, so let's just for this purpose, let's use the Superdry example. So Superdry have gone from market, they've gone to the shop, and now they want to go from 1 shop, they want to go to 3 shops, and they perhaps want to go to 20 shops. There's a number of things that they need to think about, okay? They need to make sure that they have the finances to be able to do that, because it's going to cost money to be able to scale up. That's a fact. They're also going to have to make sure that they've got the people there, okay? So they're going to have to make sure that when I talk about people, I'm talking about members of staff, making sure that they've got the best staff that they can get, okay? And making sure that those staff are looked after, they're happy, and they love the company just as much as the owner does. There also is, you know, they've got to be risk averse, because obviously it's a big risk. They don't know whether going from 3 shops to 20 shops is going to be, you know, doable. Also, there's got to be operational systems in place. It's very different having, say, 1 to 3 shops and having 20 shops. Having those operations in place is key, I think. And then also as well, making sure that you've got the management and the leadership in place, again, very, very important. And also, you know, again, if we're talking about like my client, for example, or one of my clients, there's a big onboarding element process. So again, making sure that actually, if you're bringing on new clients to scale, that actually you have that smooth transition, and actually they still get that excellent customer service that you've been able to give to the small group of customers that you've been working with. There's so many things to take into consideration, and then it's about you know, thinking about all those different things, and also having a really, really watertight plan. Yeah, absolutely. So it's mapping it out and then knowing when you've hit those benchmarks to be able to make a wise decision. Finance obviously is going to be key if you're going to have to scale to, say, 20 premises compared to just like the market stall, for example. And Susan, I wanted to then jump on to obviously what you're doing with Eugenie. If you explained Eugenie in 2 sentences just to us all so we can visualize what it is that you do.
Sure. So imagine having a Facebook group. That's the kind of social media like user interface or experience we have for our end users, but with the capabilities of a membership platform in the background. So we have a lot of a typical customer would be a professional association, a membership society, or even a coach who runs a mastermind using that community model. But we're being used by a growing number of types of businesses because community is becoming such a big part of sales today. Okay, good. You're beginning to be used by what type of companies, did you say? A variety of different types, even product-led companies. Yeah, okay, good stuff. That's probably then going to lead greatly onto what I was going to ask next, which is at the moment you're dealing with individuals or small groups or SMEs in a sense. Mm-hmm. Is your end goal to get to the enterprise level so that you're being used by companies for 1,000, 2,000 pieces of communication, or do you want to always stay small but grow exponentially because of that? Yeah, no, we are not an enterprise level software. And I think the one thing that pandemic really helped us define, because in our first instance, I mean, for us scale, we are starting to scale in the sense that we have a platform, we have a lot of customers. We now just want to get more and more customers like them to use Eugenie for what the purpose is. So we definitely are in scale up mode. But if you look at, it's not for me 100 customers, 1 million customers, but it's about getting more customers of the same kind for the same use case. No, we're not an enterprise level software. The technology itself could have a community of 10,000 use it, but we're creating, our whole infrastructure is for non-technical administrators of small networks and small business. And they have very different needs than an enterprise level, like a Barclays would need. So we're not building for enterprise. We are building for the smaller communities and smaller SMEs.
Good, excellent. And what Susan's done there is just hit the nail on the head. That's her persona. That's her customer persona. She knows exactly the type of audience she's going after. And I just want you now to talk through how you've mapped out your sales strategy for that approach to take place, so that we can all visualize how you're picking up customers. What process do you go through? What type of techniques are you using to do that sales?
So I think what Anne actually said at the beginning was really relevant as well. I mean, I have been the sales force for Eugenie until quite recently. We're now hiring more salespeople. But obviously what was important was for me to document the processes that work, those that don't work, so that we can have other people repeat that and again, scale. But our first phase of Eugenie was me joining networking groups, telling everybody what Eugenie does, and actually getting the group itself to embrace Eugenie. So I wasn't going after the enterprises, but I was going after the local networking group, joining them and saying, this could be a great tool for you. But trying to choose networks where the members would also be able to use Eugenie. So trying to use the network effect through my own networking to acquire customers. Where we've been really fortunate is that our growth has all come from recommendations and referrals of people using the platform. So, that is not as easy to just replicate, but we can put some processes in place which incentivize people to recommend and refer. And now we're getting into the point where, and this is, again, none of this has been digital marketing. So we haven't done anything on, learning how we sell Eugenie purely digitally. But from a sales process point of view, now that I'm hiring and bringing on salespeople, I'm documenting, the demo, what the demo questions look like, how we lead that first sales call, how it leads to a second sales call, and creating all those sales materials to support that person, which, when I'm doing it all myself, it's easy enough to know where everything is. But to really scale Eugenie, we're going to need to bring on more salespeople with a really concrete and repeatable sales process.
Excellent. It's a really good answer, and it links back to what Naomi mentioned about onboarding. It's not just onboarding customers, it's onboarding those team members that need to repeat the same things as you do. Just to know, obviously, and as an anecdotal story, me and Susan met, I'm going to guess, about 4 years ago. It was a slightly different proposition at the time with Eugenie, but really has stayed pretty much spot on. Obviously, over those 4 years, you've not really taken a massive pivot. About 9 months ago, we used Eugenie for some work that we were doing, running a female founder program, because we needed a closed network. We needed more functionality than something like Facebook, but we wanted to be more of a personal experience. So in terms of me being onboarded, that was a 3.5-year process. And you're probably like, oh my God, it probably actually cost me more to get you than. So how have you streamlined that process so that it's a quick process from find out about Eugenie to buy Eugenie?
I think it's about understanding the different sales funnels and how, first of all, not me putting so much time in, right? And making sure that we automate some of that touching base back in with our potential customers. So yeah, it's taken me a long time. My cost of acquisition for you was definitely didn't break even, but it was definitely worth it, right?
Yeah.
But what I'll say is, over the last 2 years as well, though, a lot of this for me has been product discovery, really discovering what the pain point is for our customers, right? Having those early adopters tell me what they like, what they don't like, what's missing, before I go and invest £100,000 in marketing to get the wrong person to my website to then start the trial and understand that this is not the right tool for them. So I think the way that we're bringing that down now is really, again, going back to what you said, identifying who we are right for so that we can target properly as well, but also create different ways in which we bring people into our CRM and automate a lot more of that support. I think one of the biggest ways we're going to do that now that we've actually have just hired a digital marketing person within our team. So that side of this of our sales process is going to grow, is we're going to launch our own community on Eugenie so that people can come in, get all the support they need within the sector, and then at some point they can convert on their own being in that. And we're doing that one-to-many approach.
Yeah. Obviously, and I'm gonna come back to Shahina, who's asked a really excellent question. and it links all together with some of the things that have been discussed, obviously, in terms of that identifying your customer persona. Is it a small
Elizabeth,
company?
please.
Oh,
sorry, that was me just trying to tell someone to be quiet in my house.
No.
Sorry.
It's okay. If anyone's noticed there's a sudden beep every now and again, it's because my fire alarm has started to make a beeping noise just as this Zoom starts. So these things happen. It's the real world. It doesn't matter. Anne, I'm going to ask you this question now. Your customer or your target client, I'm guessing, bearing in mind you're solving a big problem, which is obviously the ability for people to travel across borders and things to happen, which are terrible things to happen. I'm assuming you're looking at a governmental level or a logistics level, the haulage industry.
Both.
You're not going to be looking at SMEs, are you? You're the big
No.
end. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you go about that? You've got a great product. How do you get it in their hands?
We just contacted them. We knew them from previous work we'd done. We were part of the GCHQ collab as well in the UK, which opened a lot of doors for us. And we've been speaking with other UK government bodies because, as you can imagine, with Brexit and COVID and everything else into the mix, our second iteration will provide practically frictionless borders. So we're working on getting the first iteration out there. We're speaking to a couple of MODs about border control solutions, and how we envisage it working will be like nothing to declare in the airport. They'll be able to see all the data pertaining to the interior of the vehicle, you know, that your paperwork's in order, that nobody has breached the security of the area, etc. And it's up to them then to choose whether or not they want to stop and search. They'll still stop and search randomly, but the port's estimated they'll save about 5 hours loading and disembarking a vessel. So we're also speaking to, don't underestimate finding a way for your customers to save money. We're speaking, actually, it was through the event in Derry. We met a solicitor for the Insurance Federation. So a discount on their insurance will make them want to use it because they don't get a discount from anything else. We are also going for the highest certification possible as a differentiator. So if you're given a better quality of service, people will look at your product. If you have something that other people don't have, and even if it's something that you don't think will make the difference, speak to people and you'll find that it does, because if you've certification that's, say, 4 levels above everybody else, people will go for you if there's not that much of a difference in cost.
So I'm gonna test you here, because obviously.
Sorry, that was my dog.
No, I didn't hear any dog. I just heard lots of great pieces of advice, Anne.
He's barking at a pigeon downstairs.
No, so I'm going to take it this. You come from a coding background. I'm going to naturally think. I mean, the difference with yourself, Anne, is I could have imagined you in 100 different roles in the past, obviously, because I think you've got loads of transferable skills. But someone perhaps who's more used to being in an office environment, doing the back end stuff. I'm not going to classify everyone who does code as just like obviously not wanting to do sales, but how did you approach that at the very start, from going from having this great product to, was it just a case of getting into the room and talking to people, or did you have an approach?
We took on our son because he had experience in sales. So he came with me because I'm still not very good when it comes to negotiating price, but he is. It was like looking at a stranger in the room, to be honest with you. He was so good at it. I'll do I feel when you're selling a tech product, you need a tech person and you need a salesperson in the room.
Yeah.
You know, that's just what we have found, because the salesperson can't say they'll make modifications or whatnot, or discuss any, variations in their pain point and possible solutions to it. But a salesperson is better at closing, because getting people to say they'll buy it is not that hard, but actually closing the deal on a price really is.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And like you say, people will say they'll buy, but until that bank transfer happens, or that payment, or that contract is signed, it means shit all. And that is really important for people to realize. They can pretend they're selling. It doesn't mean anything. Naomi, you had your hand up, and I know you were jumping to get in there as well.
Yeah. So my question is, especially for something like that Anne has, in most cases, that is something that an organisation would actually put on a tender portal. So it might be that procurement wise, especially if it's government, that actually they wouldn't be open to direct sales, no matter how much money you're selling them, and they would have a procurement process. So my question to Anne would be: have you, or are you registered to procurement portals and have searches specifically around these products or services?
We do.
Right, good. And have
Yeah,
you got
we
anything
do.
from them?
We haven't, but
Because
we have joined. The other thing is, if you join the likes of the Collab or one of those accelerators, they can order directly with you because they've had a hand in the design of the product. So sometimes you can circumvent the whole tendering process if you do that.
Yeah. What I would say is there's not many that you can get away with that, because they obviously, especially with government money, but it's also worth looking outside of the UK to sell your services in the US, but also in Europe. And it's really also just another thing that I would suggest, and I'm not telling you how to suck eggs or anything.
No.
But when it comes to especially tendering, is actually working with somebody who's bloody good at tender writing.
That's actually,
there's an art to it.
We've discovered that. And we don't have it. So we decided actually that's what we're going to do once we get our next round of investment in.
I think another thing as well, just to add into that, is obviously there will be conferences and discussions around the conversation about your type of product. What I would say that also works, especially when you're sort of getting people's attention, is really making sure that you are not only in the room, but you're part of that conversation. So you are coming across as being an expert or guru of what you do. So actually, when it comes to that subject, the first person they're going, oh, Anne does that.
We're part of, Cranfield University.
Yeah.
We've just joined their logistics and supply chain, the future of supply chain technology group. And also I've been attending the Home Office think tank for Brexit and border control.
So I used to know a woman called Claire Bottle who used to be the chair of the Women in Logistics group, for which there's one in the UK. I'm not sure whether there's one in Northern Ireland, but again, it's just making sure, and I know Alistair does this for what he does, and certainly I do, is just making sure you're part of conversations.
Yeah, well, it's funny actually you mentioned that. I'm going to really mention this really quickly, but we've got Chrissy on with us today. Chrissy is doing a digital passport, which obviously is great for obviously the fact that we're going to probably have to need to show a digital passport at some point to be COVID-free, vaccinated 3 times, 4 times, whatever it's going to be.
I've got the NHS app.
Yeah, and then we've got Anne, obviously, who's doing borderless work as well. So you guys should connect, because there could be some good conversation and learning from both of you.
Definitely.
On that. But I'm gonna kind of think about now, like obviously, Susan, with what you're doing with Eugenie, how much did you tailor your sales strategy as you've moved along, and how much has that changed? And again, going back to the fact that it took, in a way, 3.5 years to convert me as a customer. What are the steps now for someone else listening in that they could make to obviously make sure that there are certain things that you can do to make sure that process is quicker? Is there technology you can use? Are there other things that you can do?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely technology that can be used more efficiently in terms of my first CRM was an Excel spreadsheet, right, where I would put everyone's contact information, where I met them, the potential value, and things like that. We moved over to a proper CRM and client, which I think is a really, really powerful tool. We moved into Infusionsoft last year, or maybe a year and 18 months ago, which again helped us with streamlining those conversations, understanding where people are coming from, sending out that newsletter. We're now actually upgrading to HubSpot because it has so much more functionality. So from a technology standpoint, I think the other thing though is that when you're first starting out, it can be quite intimidating. You don't need all these systems in on day one. It's about, really, I think if I had jumped to systems from day one, I wouldn't know my customers and their pain points as much as I do now. So I'm a very big part of that sales process. But yeah, now going forward, we've learned the pains. We know what works. We know what doesn't. And as a tech founder, any founder, right? As we start to now look at our Series A funding in hopefully 12 to 18 months, what people are going to be looking for is our cost of acquisition of a customer. So it won't work if I say, well, it took me 14,000 hours to convert Alistair, which at my hourly rate means that I should just give him Eugenie. But it was, so I guess I looked at that as like research and development. It's also about understanding, the cost of my time and how I'm factoring that all in. But technology can definitely do that. And then I think it's this whole idea of how can you automate some support but still have touch point, right? And really, I think sales is still to a certain level, especially for our white label product, which is when you buy a copy of Eugenie, that's like it's a 5 to 6 figure ticket there. We need a salesperson involved. Whereas someone who's coming on to the website, starting a trial at £35 a month, we want to completely automate, and we know what messaging we need to build in that automated funnel to do that. But I don't think there's a shortcut around some of the stuff that I did. I think we could have done it faster if I'd brought in more people. But we still needed to learn those lessons, which we can now automate and make it faster.
Excellent answer. And this is jumping between sales, financing, people, all of these conversations, because it's not like they're all individual. It's not like you can just talk about sales and marketing without talking about people development or the development of your customer service, processes as well. And the one thing I'm picking up on all of this so far is we need a tendering person, we need a salesperson, we don't need the techie person to maybe do the sales pitch. We need obviously processes, we need HubSpot. These things all cost money. So in terms of the scale up process, Susan, you had that Excel spreadsheet, that's free. At what point in terms of turnover did you make the decision that you needed to upscale the processes that you had in place? And was it a risk? Risk aversion is obviously key. So was it a risky thing to do? Did you have to put money on the line to do that and then hope it comes back?
Yes. So I think the point where we switched over is when I could no longer manage. There was too many people in the Excel spreadsheet. I wasn't following up at the right times. I was getting feedback. Oh, if you had reached out to me a month ago, this would have been the right thing for us at that point. So you start to understand yourself that the process that you have in place is not working when you have 100 people or 200 people in that spreadsheet. I think also you have to invest for scale. So that there's going to be a certain amount of investment in your business that is not going to directly correlate with your sales, but it's your overhead. And we felt we had to do that just because some of the other things that a CRM can do, right? To send out emails and keep yourself connected with the potential customer. At the moment, I'm using HubSpot for startups. So they have a great program where you can get 90% off. So you can get all the power, but at a price point that most startups can afford. And then by the time we get to the point where we go to their proper plan, where it's like, I don't know, £1,000 a month, it will probably be such a valuable tool in our business that we'll spend that money without even thinking about it. And so I'm almost like working toward that, wanting that level of tool, because I know that there's enough revenue coming in to validate that. Just one point on the CTO selling, the mistake I've made, so if we want to talk about a failure, is technical people are definitely not always the right salespeople, because they always talk about what can happen, not necessarily what you should be giving to the customer at that price point. So my CTO is very, he's happy to serve customers, and he's always like, yeah, we can do that, no problem, right? But what he's saying is, oh, we can do that, and it's included in the contract, versus I'm saying we can do that, but it costs £2,000 for us to do that. So we had a white label.
That's dangerous.
Very dangerous. And we learned this lesson very poor, like in a real world way, where having conversations, we had this white label customer that we were going to do some bespoke functionality for, which I quoted for. And then I'm not that technical, so I need to get him involved in the conversation. but all of a sudden he's agreeing to things that they're not paying for, and then we kind of get caught in that weird. So, I think it's almost like you need a technical person who understands the tech but knows how to sell, rather than getting your CTO to be on a sales call.
Okay, cool. And then I'm going to go back to Shahina now, and obviously her question, which is, how do we approach enterprise organizations after working with smaller businesses? So Naomi, I'm going to ask you this, obviously knowing that you work with different ranges of companies. In terms of Susan and her journey as an example, really, in a sense, she doesn't ever want to work with enterprise organizations, but however, Susan could be an enterprise organization for HubSpot, because when she's got 100 staff and Eugenie has scaled and she's no longer a startup, she's on their enterprise program, she's going to be paying them, I don't know, £1,000 a month to use HubSpot. With the 90% off, it was really accessible to Susan as an early stage business, as a small organization. So she's gone through that channel of being a startup, a small company, to potentially down the line an enterprise company. So is price an important part of working with both small and enterprise organizations, and using those small companies in a way to develop your products so that you can work with enterprise as you scale? Or can you do both at the same time?
Well, just going to Shahina's question, which actually said, how do we approach enterprise organizations after working with smaller businesses? So I was using the example in my response to her with regards to my friend Adam. So Adam has a product which, because the thing is, another thing as well, which I would also say about from startup to scale up is that because you've obviously been working with your customers, your product is probably evolved, and you might have added on new things, etc. So if we use like Susan's example, she's saying that she's not looking at working with smaller businesses. That's what Adam thought, and actually this big customer that he's got, this enterprise customer, and considering he's based in Manchester, this is a company called Box, who are massive in America. He actually got that through going on a trade mission to San Francisco with Tech Nation. And it was just by having a chance conversation with somebody. So yes, obviously you've got that, with his thing, he did an initial pilot. That pilot's worked, and now he's obviously going to scale. And yes, of course, as a big customer, they need to know that they're getting value for money. So you've obviously got to get the price right. But to actually have those conversations in the first place, it's really about making sure that you're speaking to the right person. Okay, making sure that you can articulate exactly what problem you're solving for that particular customer. And do you know what? They're not as difficult to find as you think they are. I think the world has become a much smaller place because obviously we've got things like LinkedIn, we've got events that we can go to, whether it's offline or online. But again, as I said to Anne before, it's a bit about being part of the conversation. It's about being in the room. And I think it's certainly. If you were going to approach, say, a really big company like Ernst & Young or Accenture or something like that, the person ultimately making the decision about putting some money in the back pocket is probably going to be at their head office in London, or might be at head office in the USA. But it's you being able to, say to whoever's making the decision in the UK that actually by them buying your product or service, that you're going to give them value for money. It's a bit like, if you look at like how people sell sponsorship. When you're selling sponsorship, it's always like, let's just say you get like a 5 or a 10-page deck. And within that, you've got in there exactly what the event is. For example, if we're talking about event sponsorship, the type of people that are going to be at the event, and being able to say, actually, as a customer, I know what type of customers that you want because I know that you do well at this event. And being able to say, okay, for £2,000 sponsorship, you're going to get A, B, C, and D. It's the same with anything. It's just, and it's also as well about having the confidence to have those conversations. Don't be scared about having conversations with really big companies, because I think people are terrified about it. But it's just about having the conversation with the right person.
Oh, Naomi, you're like the best person for me to like lead on to the next question. It's just like you were reading my brain of what I was going to ask next. I'm actually having like a conversation, by the way, with Naomi, Susan, and Anne. They're all my buddies. This is the first time this has ever happened.
Alistair,
Like all the other ones. I think they're my buddies anyway. They might tell me otherwise. But I was going to just say, Anne, you said GCHQ. I say, well, that's a big company. That's amazing. Like, so, and then Naomi says it's not that difficult to get the conversations with the right people. How easy was it for you to get GCHQ, and how did that come about?
It wasn't very difficult. We received an invitation from them, but we found out subsequently we knew it anyway, to be honest with you, all these large corporates, they don't do their own product development really anymore. They would rather buy in from an SME or a startup. And they had spotted us in Germany at a tech event pitching 3 years previously and had followed us from tech event to tech event. And that often happens. Like Vodafone were just amazing for us. They gave us everything we needed for early prototyping for free. We had a meeting with Vodafone in Berlin, and they got onto Vodafone in Ireland and helped us. And like, we were approached by Veolia, ContiTech, which is the tech version of Continental, or the tech wing of Continental Tires. They come to you. You don't even need to approach them. If you're seen at these tech events, I know you can't do them now because, you know, but now, in fairness, I actually used to be physically sick before I pitched, but you get used to it.
That shows you care, Anne. You care. That's good.
Yeah. One time in Riga, I had food poisoning, which didn't help. But they come to you because they're actually actively looking for solutions.
Absolutely. And this is not just obviously in your specific sector. If I said to you that Crisis, for example, have got a venture team that look for technology startups to help solve the problem of homelessness, you might go, what? But they do. If I was to say that Arsenal Football Club have run a corporate accelerator, they have. Metro Bank, they do. BMW, they all do them. So if you are looking for a serious high-level corporate to work with, even at an early stage as a startup, do you agree, Anne, that this is a good way for you to not only validate?
It's the best. Yeah.
It's a good way to validate,
and
isn't it?
F6S is a website. If you go onto it, F6S is like a platform for all these. You'll see all these accelerators and everything from all the different corporates.
Yeah. Okay, so F6S,
so if you sign
I know
F for Freddy, number 6, and S for sugar.
And it's f6s.com, isn't it, if I remember rightly?
Yeah.
Yeah, so have a look at that, everybody. It's an easy way for you to pick up. There's a difference between an accelerator where you're working and they're trying to work with you to upscale your business, and then they'll get you investors, they'll get you clients. But a corporate accelerator is they'll have internal challenges, they'll set them, and then they'll need companies like Susan's and Anne's and yours to try and solve those internal problems. And if they match what you're doing, what a great way to basically get a massive client with a big customer base. Naomi.
So another thing that's worth also keeping an eye out as well is, and again, there's different ways of getting access to this, but Bowhurst have some really good reports about, the UK's top accelerators, but also when it comes to, let's just say you were on that stage of scaling up, there's reports that you can get from Bowhurst to say, okay, who's like the top 20 investors that have invested in, say, logistics, and that helps you identify. So if Anne, honestly, it's fantastic. And I've just connected with you on LinkedIn. If you ever want a report, I can get access to reports for you for somebody that I know.
Excellent.
But please just ask.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it's really good just to sort of almost give you a breadth of like, okay, what's the sort of scale up side of things looking like? But I forgot. I think that's what I was going to say.
No, cool. And Susan, I know you had your hand up as well. Sorry.
I think the one thing that we have to be careful about, though, is that you're right. We can get in front, have the right conversations, and be good networkers and get in front of these big companies. And I don't think we should be scared of that. But I think it's also be really understanding what they need as a bare minimum to serve their need. Because, for example, right, Facebook Workplace could be seen as our enterprise level competitor, right? They have a lot of the functionality that bigger companies need, and then companies use that as their internal social network. We don't have single sign-on at the moment. And so one of the first things these conversations teach me, right? I always ask, well, what are you looking for? What are your key needs and challenges? So I think if it is enterprise level that you want to get to, and at some point I hope we can, but that's also then another team member, another department. That's almost like when I want to scale the different types of products Eugenie has, rather than scale this one product to lots of people. I need to make sure that we have the functionality that they need, or I have to negotiate a contract that pays for the development of the stuff that they need, which is also a great way to scale the business, right? To get one of those big fish to pay for functionality everybody else needs as well, and then be able to scale that across other customers. We definitely do that with some of our white labels, where we say, yeah, you can build this, but it will benefit all the other white labels in the future. Because I've definitely had conversations with some really big companies who say, well, these are our key needs. And we don't have the capability at the moment to fulfill that. So it's about also making that strategic decision that, do we want to go after this one big enterprise level client that could be very big, but if it doesn't turn out, we've spent a lot of resources trying to get them? Or do we serve the people we can serve now, but just serve more of them? So I think it's always, we all want those big fish, or those 5 contracts that pay for the next 5 years of development. But our product has to be ready for it as well.
100%, Susan. Yeah,
you have to learn to say no, because we've said no to 2 large corporates that wanted so many changes. It would have put us back a year. And I was like having nightmares about the fact that I had said no after I said no, but it just would have set us back too far.
Well, if the money's in the bank, I'm happy to do it. But by the time the contracts actually go
no, it would have taken, they would have had to pilot it first. So yeah,
it's a really good question, or some of the things that you're flagging up for the next part of our conversation, which, to be fair, Naomi, I know you have to go at 3 o'clock potentially. Are you okay for 5 minutes?
I am for 5 minutes. I don't want to go because I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, no, happy days.
Yeah, I can stay for 5 minutes.
No, cool. I'm just doing your timekeeping because I know that I don't want to mess you around. I wanted to just really quickly say, Michael, day one of what you're doing, I love the fact that you're a day one. This is so exciting because when you asked the question, you said something like, what would be your piece of advice? My piece of advice, and I'm not going to get everyone else to say theirs, is basically know that you're always on day one in some sense, because there's always the big pain in the ass thing that's going to come. And all you're doing is soaking up information every day. It's just the things that you need to soak up will change when you go from day 1 to day 2 to year 3 to year 5. Obviously you've got a lot to learn, but so have we all, I think. And then secondly, you mentioned that you've been used to pitching to the likes of Gulfstream and Boeing. Boeing was a recent accelerator program that was run, and they were looking for solutions within the airline industry. So it's funny that you mentioned that. Shahina asked, what would you recommend is the best way to approach expansion into the US and the rest of Europe as a UK tech startup? I'm just going to say straight away, understand cultural differences and how people sell in different countries. It might take you 2-3 years to sell to someone in one country, and in America, they might buy within 2 days. Anne, any experience so far with working in different countries?
We're in talks with Rotterdam, with some Eastern European countries, obviously the UK and Ireland, and we're in talks with border control, like very, very early stage talks of border control in the States. And it is different. It's different everywhere.
Why is it different?
Well, in Holland, or Netherlands, show my age here. In the Netherlands, they just like the facts. No messing around, no nothing. But Berlin is different to the rest of Germany in that they're more kind of like the Irish or the English in Berlin. They like kind of a mix. But the rest of Germany would be like Holland. It's like nearly bullet points. This is what we have. Boom, 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 boom. This is what it does. This is what it'll save you. And this is what it'll cost. That's all they care about. They don't care if like you're a part-time pirate with a broken leg. As long as you can provide what they need, that's it. Whereas in other countries, like in Eastern Europe, they like to have a chat. And their motto is we buy from people, not from companies.
I think that's probably
So
the same with a lot of countries, you know. It's like, and it's, people buy from people, don't they? And people relate to stories as well. And I think storytelling comes a lot into this as well. There's a brilliant guy that I know called Ross McKenzie, and I call him the $1 billion man. He sold $1 billion worth of product for Hewlett Packard in his sales career, and he does sales training, and he also does coaching, but he's like a nice coach, not one of those like weird coaches. And sorry if there's any coaches on the call.
no, I'm laughing
And
because
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
And what he does, he gets you, and please listen to this, especially those of you at that very day one, is you are selling the impact. So what you're saying is, if somebody buys my product, this is the impact that's going to have. Okay, I'm going to throw something else in that he also says is, what is the impact of that impact? Right. And Anne, if you talk about your business, obviously, you know, the impact, that there might be an initial impact, but it's about that much bigger impact. And if you can articulate that, people will just buy from you all day long.
Yeah, it's a good point. So the impact is you're saving lives, but the impact is you're saving time, but the impact is you're saving money.
But it's the impact of that impact. It's beyond that. So, you know, if we were going to say about Susan's business, for example, and I've just sent a link to my colleagues. I did a really amazing program for freelancers, and your platform would be great to support the next program if we can get the money to be able to build it. But let's not build it, to take it on. But just to give me just for you to give me an example based on that. So if I use your product, the impact to the women on my program is it's going to give them a sense of community and give them one place where they can engage with you, et cetera, et cetera. The impact of that impact might be that actually, because of that community, there's more collaborations together, and that their businesses will get bigger. And actually, the impact of that impact, that actually some of these people will then be able to employ other people. It's about thinking beyond the initial impact, and that's the really powerful thing. And I think storytelling and case studies are really, really important as well.
And that would be a way for Shahina to look at perhaps how she could go from a small business to an enterprise business. Is it a stepping stone approach in a sense? You start with the next one down and use them as the case study.
I think case, you know, obviously you want as many case studies as you can, really, but going back to this impact thing, I think that's something that you, in your mind, you should be able to articulate from day one. Because you're going to have in your head, okay, you know, this is there's always a why about why you're doing what you're doing. And, you know, the impact of someone buying your product or service is going to be one thing. But actually, if you look at the impact of that impact, it's going to be far more powerful.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we also have to look at what would happen if they don't buy it.
Exactly. So,
what is the risk of not having everybody in one place for me, for example, for not building that community?
Exactly.
And it's almost like if you don't do this is what could happen. It's still impact, but risk of not doing something.
Now, Susan is definitely a salesperson, because what you're doing is you're basically dealing with objections. So you've got someone on the phone and they say, no, I don't think I want to buy from that. And then you're dealing with the objection. That's an old school sales approach, obviously, when we're all used to doing business development over the phone, and it's something that maybe people have forgotten. Do you think that it's hard to find good salespeople? Yes or no? And Naomi, Susan?
Yes, and I think so. And it's also as well, I think that business development is more now about building relationships in the first instance, rather than just selling them something. I think it's about building that relationship up, and trust. People buy from people that they know, like, and trust. I've got to go. I'm so sorry, but enjoy the rest of the conversation.
Naomi, thank you very so much.
Thanks a million, Naomi.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
So, Susan, I wanted to actually ask you, when Shahina has been asking these questions, your question to her was, what is your exit strategy? Now, I've got Michael here, who's on day one of doing his business. And also Shahina is obviously talking about going from small business up to enterprise. Why are you asking about exiting the business? What's that got to do with what we're talking about now?
Because I think every sales strategy you can't just have an immediate sales strategy, right? You need to have your longer term sales strategy as well. So right now we're selling to SMEs and small businesses within the coaching sector. And then next year, we want to expand to a different sector. Next year, looking at geographies as well. And the reason I also asked about her product is because I think that makes a difference in how you're going to sell in a different geography and how much money you need to sell in a different geography, especially as a UK tech startup. So I think it's important to understand where you want to exit, because you also might start preparing yourself for sales in a particular sector. So our last round we raised was one of our lead investors was a guy who sold his business to Salesforce. And so all his thing is all things sales, right? He was a CRO of his business and he did all of that. And what he's telling us to do is our vision is to exit Eugenie in the next 3 to 5 years. So what we might want to do is focus on a specific sector that makes us more appealing for acquisition by certain companies. That's going to affect who we sell to, how we sell, whether we even try to expand to the US, because the US has a lot of competition in our market as well. And that's the other thing very specifically with the US is with US, you could probably go raise a round of funding over drinks and get like $5 million. Whereas in the UK, they're going to be like, I'm going to give you 10,000 pounds for what? Like, it's a very different mentality as well when you're raising investment. And investment is also selling your business, right? It's a very different type of selling that we as founders have to do alongside selling our product. So I think the reason I ask these questions is that if you know what your potential long-term exit is or your game strategy is, you can then plan for that within what you're selling, how you're selling it, and what investment you need also to scale the business.
Yeah, okay, perfect, good stuff. I think it's really good. And what you're doing is mapping out that journey from, I don't know, MVP stage all the way up to scale up and beyond. But we all need to know where it's going to go. Unless you want to die with that business, you've got to get rid of it at some point, haven't you? And Susan mentioned obviously about countries. And I think she made a really good point. And Raise have just flagged this 5 minutes warning before we close down the breakout room. So we've got 5 minutes. So we're just going to do some closing remarks now. Are there some countries, like Susan mentioned, that you're probably looking to avoid, either because there's too much legislation, it would be too difficult, or there's already solutions there?
We're avoiding countries for different reasons. Because we're in defense and security, we'll be avoiding, say, Russia, China. You know, we'll be avoiding any countries that could pose a threat. Even all our components have been sourced from Europe, where we have to be very careful how we work. I have my ideal investor in my mind, and it's a US investor. I have to be really, no, it's not for this round, it'll be for a further round, but I have to be really careful that we haven't done anything that will make it impossible for them to invest with us.
Excellent. It's a really good point. It kind of picks up on what Susan mentioned as well, which is mapping out a long-term strategy. It's not this investor, it's the next one. Look how far down the line Anne and Susan are looking at in terms of their journey. So it's mapping out from year 1 to year 10, where you're going to go with this, who do you need to get to. Crunchbase is a great way to look and find out who your competitors in your space are also getting investment from. And then you can look at maybe other investors in that space. Have they not invested in a SaaS product in that sector? Well, maybe they'll invest in me. So you can start mapping out who you want to find as an investor or who you want to work with. In terms of obviously the business development strategy though, Susan, and you mentioned this, it might be a good plan to work in countries where they don't have that software. So you mentioned the US is saturated with something similar. So why would you bother? When you could maybe go to Canada and they don't. Is that something that you consider all the time, Susan? Obviously, and what would happen if someone else came into the UK market, or there was 10 of what you were doing? What would you do?
So there are already a lot of people jumping into online community, right? And because of the pandemic, so it's a very competitive landscape. I'm following the US very carefully, because although it's a big market, there are big players. And I think the good thing about the US market though, is our biggest competitor just raised 50 million pounds. It's great validation for our space. So actually more and more people are going to get familiar with the type of platform we have, and it's going to pave the road for easier sales for everyone. I'm starting to look at Dubai and East Africa and different markets where I feel like I can be the big fish. It might be a smaller market, but again, my exit strategy is acquisition. So maybe one of these US players will come over to Europe and say, well, who's the biggest player in a smaller market? Let me buy Eugenie. So I'm following all the US people. I don't want to also compete on. So if we go back to one of the main things that we need to do this year is understand our acquisition costs for each customer. In the US, I'm competing with 5 or 6 other big companies who are spending millions of pounds in sales ads and advertising. So every pound I spend is going to be, I have to spend more in the US to get the same level of customers, whereas in the UK, Europe, East Africa, I can spend less money to acquire the same number of customers. So my cost of acquisition per customer goes down. So it's better for me to be looking at it in that way.
Excellent. And it's a great point to perhaps finish on, which is the cost
Sorry,
of your
can I
customer
just-
acquisition. Yes, sorry, Anne, go on.
Susan, I can give you an introduction to Abu Dhabi if you wanted, to funders from Abu Dhabi who, it's the same type of thing. They will have pilots, and what it pays really, it's 800 grand and they'll pilot you there.
Yes, I would love any introductions. Thank you.
I'm getting that introduction too, Anne. I don't know what it is, but I'm getting it.
Alistair's our man on the ground, so you know we're getting it.
No,
happy days.
I know guys who are doing it and they've been absolutely amazing to them. So,
Well, isn't this a good way to end it, actually? In terms of sales, and Anne mentioned it at the very start, it's all about people development. It's about connecting with people, explaining succinctly what you do, and by the end of that 20-25-minute call, being able to connect and maybe refer people on. And I'll end on this note. I'm working with a team in Leeds at the moment, and they're talking about the pitch process. And the pitch process to me is maybe 2-3 minutes, or an elevator pitch of 1 minute long. And I'm talking to academics who don't understand that 10-15 minutes is too long. And I've said, you need to get that pitch down to 3 minutes, to 2 minutes, to 1 minute, so people understand what you do. And that's sales, isn't it, Anne and Susan? It's getting that pitch tailored so people understand exactly what you do as quickly as possible. Susan, Anne, any final points? You've got 20 seconds.
And I guess mine would be, your network is actually your net worth. And you know, that quote always sits well with me, because it is about who you know, your first customers will come from that network.
Excellent. Anne, 10 seconds.
I tend to agree with that, but I would also say get out there as soon as things open up and attend all the, if it's a tech company, attend the tech events,